proves that it actually did cure, and it's. I'm squeezing on this, and it's got a little bit of flex, but it's not going to break. So the tape pops pretty easily. You can just pop it like that, and off it comes.
Did the translucent stuff come in?
Did it what?
We were getting translucent resin, right? Or no?
Something messed up with the order, but I will look again. I have to order more resin for you regardless. I'll try to get some that doesn't have like the skull and crossbones on it. Because that's the problem I'm finding, is that clear stuff is, the chemistry involved is not friendly. So I don't want to expose you guys to anything that'll turn you into a mutant model maker like myself. We'll keep you, unmutated as much as possible. Okay, so here's our funnel, or the spigot, the syringe we use as a funnel. I should be able to turn it and pop right out. There is a way to reuse this, but it's a giant effort. It's 5 minutes of fun with put a screw in here, and then you try to pull the thing out. Don't sweat it. These are it's inert. Yes, you're throwing a little bit into the waste stream, but as I explained before, prototyping is where you're sort of almost kind of allowed to do that, and you just want to avoid that when you go into production. So we have the mold, and let's see what happens. Anybody is there any sort of betting line on this? Did you mess up? Is there one bubble? Is there 10 bubbles?
No bubble. No bubble.
No bubbles. Well, I wouldn't bet on no bubbles. I made the thing. Okay, so here we go.
That's like cake.
It looks like cake?
Looks like cookies and cream.
There you go.
Yeah.
You get the first bite.
French vanilla.
No, it looks like what is it? Panna cotta.
Or it looks like eggnog, almost.
Like panna cotta.
So here we go. Apparently I lost one of my vents, but all of my vents, they're actually hollow, or some of them are hollow because the resin went up and got in there, and then as it shrank, it just turned into a hollow tube instead of a solid tube. But that's all right. We're going to cut those off anyway. This is called flashing, or flash, right? You get that to a lesser extent on injection molded parts when the parts are worn out or poorly made, right? And it comes off of this pretty easily. Here's our pouring spout, right? That's the inlet. That's the gate where everything went in. And let's see, on the back here we have a little bit of flash that is over the thing that we want to be a hole. See, now it's a hole, right? This is all it's just gonna take, maybe 10 minutes with a knife and maybe a pair of clippers to get rid of that. And if I want to, since this is not, the actual color isn't a thing of beauty, I'm going to consider painting this. So that gives me the option to fix the parts that I don't like. Like, remember on the mold we've got this piece right here, this extra piece of silicone that I didn't get rid of. So that left, whenever you have something positive, you have too much material on the mold, that means you have not enough material on the part, and vice versa, okay? So I can fill that in with Bondo and sand it, and then it'll be a perfectly good lampshade, okay? If I was doing this in clear, and I had that, my options are very limited. I'd want to get the mold right and redo the part, because there isn't any clear Bondo, okay? Not yet, anyway. So there's that, and I have my little ears that I'm going to drill through for a hinge pin. Remember, we were going to do that. And my bosses, I will sort of flatten those out, and then put my electronics on there and double check that I have everything in the right place, and then mark a center, and then drill. I actually bought screws like they're tiny. I forget the numbers on them.
3.5.
I think they're smaller than 3.5 diameter screws. It might be 2 millimeter diameter, and they're meant to go into plastic. So they're tiny little screws. And I bought the correct size drill bit to drill in so that the screws will fit just right. They're thread forming screws, and they go in and they lock themselves in. So that's cool. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to do. I would drill those holes in there, and then I can mount my electronics temporarily, because everything's going to come in and out 100 times as you build this thing. So that is where this part is. The next step for me is probably to dry fit everything, get all my parts together and fit them, get my electronics together, and figure out does everything fit? How well does it fit? Where am I going to put the USB-C plug? I have an idea, but I haven't done that yet. And then how am I going to attach the arm to the base? I have some ideas on that. I just have to try them out and see how that works. I'm happy to assist and advise and be as valuable as I can on your thing for the rest of the workshop today. But this concludes today's sit around and listen to Andy talk for an hour. Yes?
Can you sand the plastic?
Oh yeah, this sands really well. But you got to wait till it's cured. If it's still like 4 to 5 hours after you've poured it, and take it out if it's still flexible, it's not going to sand super well.
Please stop.
Yeah. I'm used to having things removed from my hands.
Can you spray it easily?
Yeah, it'll accept paint and primer.
Oh, cool.
What I would do is, because everything's sort of outgasses, there's a little bit of stuff that comes off the silicone, a little bit of silicone oil. There's always some sort of thing on the surface of a part that you make. You want to wash this off before you consider putting anything permanent on it. Like even if it's, wash it off with a solvent or soap and water, something like that. Then you can sand it and clean it up and test fit it. You can use a file if it's too tight. If it doesn't fit right, you can do that. It'll drill really well. Okay. It smells good. Are you kidding?
Yeah, it does smell good.
Does it?
Yeah.
Really? I haven't tried. No, my sense of smell is toasted. So
What does it smell like?
Smells like food.
it smells like
What
food.
does it smell like?
Smell like food.
What do you eat?
It could just be like that. It looks like cream, so I'm smelling cream. I don't know.
Smells like.
I smell that.
I would recalibrate your sense of smell. If that's Yeah, Susie, come on in. Okay, this is an anonymous mold from somebody in the class named Susie, who I will not name, who just did her mold and look.
I fail like a champion.
Well, go big or go home. I mean, what we have here is she used a very thin middle bowl, right? And because there wasn't, I'm guessing that there was probably some squish factor where when the two halves of the mold were put together, what used to be separated by the metal bowl, there was enough wiggly in there so that they contacted each other. So we'll have to devise a fix for that. But there was no air on here. It came out good. I mean, it conformed to the mold that it saw, but the mold that it saw did not produce the part that we wanted. So it's not the mold's fault. The mold did what it was told to do.
How would you suggest to get around something like this, or to solve for something like this?
We could consider repouring one side of the mold with the master back in it. We could modify the master so that it's got a thicker wall. We could, I guess, try lifting the mold up a little bit, but since there's basically zero draft around here, we'd have to lift it up, 12 or 15 millimeters before the draft change, before the thickness changed down here at all. And by that point, you've got a part that's that thick up here. So those are some options, but
could you just brush on more material and then do a real good sand job, or
brush on more material to this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose.
I mean, before you pull it, the bottom off, which would probably rip it apart.
Ooh, one thing we could do, we could try. We could take this part off. We could cut a circle of fiberglass to drop in here, and then put the mold back together, and the fiberglass would separate everything. But the fiberglass this resin is thin enough so the fiberglass will saturate it. And then you would have a fiberglass reinforced part that, if you decided to paint it, would look like what you intended. And I think the fiberglass down around the edge would create some thickness. It would hold the thickness. It might be different from what you intended, but it would be, that's one way to go around this. I'll see if I can dig up any fiberglass and we can try that.
Okay.
It's worth trying just because it's a cool experiment.
Okay.
Okay, so that's one way we could do that.
Why? I don't get how it's so thin up here too, though. I get it why it's thin here, but why is it thin?
I think it's because the pattern itself, the thing that created the cavity, was really thin steel. Like, I don't know, like half a millimeter or less.
Andy, what if I just put clay here? Because it's only here the problem, right? Like this
This is
might
kind of
work.
thin too. You can see purple in there.
Yeah.
That's going to be pretty thin.
I can just fill this with clay
And recast it?
and recast
Absolutely.
just
Yep.
this
Yep.
part of the mold.
Yep. And in the there's a an older industry called pattern making, where they did a lot of wooden models of things that were used for creating a sand mold to cast iron into. And what you could do then is you could just make the cavity side of the pattern, right? And you just ram the sand down and make a mold out of it. And then you could turn the mold over, and they still make sheet wax with an adhesive on one side. And you could cut the sheet wax and bend it into place at whatever desired thickness you were. And then when you created the other side of the mold, that wax would create your part. So that's it's not going to help poor Susie, but that's one way to look at it. So.
How do you create draft in a model like this? Which is
well, the bowl does not have any draft.
So if I want to, create a mold of something that doesn't have a draft, so should I have something else? Like if I want to make a mold which is like almost straight, how do I ensure it comes out easy?
On a silicone mold, you can have zero draft, especially in like non-production. Onesie, twosie, or even 100 or something. You can have no draft, and you can just sort of wiggle the thing around and pull it out. You can actually get away with a little bit of what they call capture, where it's actually negative draft. You can get away with a little bit of that, but it does wear down the mold faster, and it can fail, but you can usually get a handful of parts out of it before it fails. So this stuff is translucent enough you can check the wall thickness by looking at it against the light, and it looks like mine. It's thicker on one side than the other on this piece, and if you hold it up to the light, you can see that. Anybody want to try? You can see that it's darker, and it blocks the light more. So that means it's the resin is thicker on one side. So mine probably shifted in the mold a little bit.
Andy, how do you remedy the thinner part? You see that one with the
this part right there? I would have to remove that or create a new cavity side of the mold.
Now that you've made this,
now that I've made it, well, I know I'm going to paint it. So I can just fill it with a body filler, like a plastic filler, like Bondo. Do you remember using that? I can fill it with that, and then once I get it into primer, nobody will know that it's been filled.
Oh, we're applying less than us or stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm teaching you stuff sort of out of order, but you're going to use all of it at some point in your life if you continue to do this.
It looks like there's a little bit of like debris or like.
Yeah, that's another good point. Yeah, I didn't surgically clean the mold before I cast the part, and neither did Susie. So we have bits of silicone mold dust in the part, and that's typical of like the first part. And so the first part you can just consider as an experiment if you're doing multiples. Or you can make sure your part is totally clean before you pour into it.
So if we wanted to make it clean, you just wash it and you cool it off the roll.
Yeah, or compressed air to blow the thing out. We don't have that here, but that's an option. Or a paper towel.
Bubbles.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's the.
It's not the way
Others are like doing
It's the mystery of mold making. To get rid of those, well, I would have to get rid of the air around the mold too. Or I'd have to come up with a system that was much better at
most
removing.
acceptable
Yeah, if I know I'm going to paint it, this is acceptable. If I wanted to keep it as is, molded in color, and maybe be translucent, I would have to get it more perfect than this is. And I've done stuff like that. I did things like that for Matt. I used like a translucent material, and you could see through it, so I had to do a really good job using the mold stick. And I used the proper equipment, the vacuum, and the pressure pot, and all that, so I had that advantage. Yeah, it's not bad. All right, are you trying to pull that up?
I'm trying to save the syringe. Where is the syringe?
You can. What I would do, no, I've had to do that before. Take a sheetrock screw and drill it in, and then just sort of wedge it like this with a pair of pliers. You know what I mean? Like if you drill it in down far enough, and then you come in with this, You start working it. It's a pain in the
And then
butt.
you can pull it out.
You can pull it out, yeah.
I thought you just from this side, but I guess.
No, it's a lot easier to pull than push.
Okay.
Did he assault you?
What?
Yes.
No, he's displaying his thing with a phone.
I didn't see it, but I could feel it.
He's displaying his strength by tearing this.
Wow.
Wow, you're so strong. Oh my gosh.
I'm just making a mess now.
I know, I saw that.
It's so satisfying to tear it.
All right, and I would just remind you that now is a really good time to work on your lamp. Yay, because T equals 0 for everything at MIT, so you might as well work on the lamp when I'm yelling at you. Cool. None of you are buying this. You're like, no, we have bigger things to do.
No.
I hate that.
I mean, we're
about
all
smart people.
What do you mean? We're gonna do it though.
So as t approaches infinity equals 0.
Yeah. I'm going to use a little pair of clippers and put those off. Then I'm going to put the electronics on there. And then do you want to do a needle or a
I locked on every
I'm going to mark the center
so no one ever asked me
and then I'm going to drill.
Oh, so then no one ever wanted me to
And then I'm going to put those tiny plastic screws in there that I talked about and screw it on
One thing
there.
I excel at. Like the circle could be bigger, right?
Oh yeah, the circle can be really big. But and this
Anyway.